Coming up on Arirang News, a South Korean man has been freed from militants in Libya after more than 300 days in captivity. The UAE helped get him free, apparently, thanks to a summit with President Moon Jae-in. The Finance Ministry warns of growing downside risks to the Korean economy, with data showing exports continuing to fall, partly because of the U.S.-China trade war. And South Korea's trade minister is in Washington to try and secure an exemption from new tariffs on cars that the Trump administration is reportedly planning to impose. A decision of some kind is expected this Saturday. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for joining us on our afternoon newscast. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea's presidential office says a South Korean man who was abducted by armed militants in Libya last year has been released unharmed. The man, identified by his surname Ju, will return to Korea on Saturday. Shin Se-min reports.
A South Korean man ready to return home after 315 days of being held captive by militants in Libya. The presidential office said Friday that the 62-year-old, identified by his surname Ju, had been freed unharmed on Thursday evening Korea time. He was a worker at a local water plant in Jabal Hassaouna in southeastern Libya.
Shortly after the man's abduction, our government created a task force team with the Foreign Ministry and National Intelligence Service at the center of it. We cooperated with allied governments including Libya, the US, the UK, France and Italy to help free the hostage.
The security chief also said the militants are a known criminal gang that operates in the region, but details of the man's kidnapping and the conditions he was held in are still being investigated. The top office said the United Arab Emirates played an active role in freeing the South Korean man, referring back to a summit between President Moon Jae-in and the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan when they agreed to support Seoul's efforts to secure the man's release. Chung said the UAE's foreign ministry looks to have coordinated closely with Libyan defense officials, but no further details have been made public. South Korea's presidential office reaffirmed it'll come up with complementary measures to secure the safety of South Korean nationals in danger zones around the world to prevent similar cases happening again in the near future. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, during that same briefing, South Korea's National Security Advisor Chung Eui-yong also said he expects specific plans to be revealed soon in regards to sending humanitarian food aid to North Korea. When asked about the progress made amid the North's recent firing of short-range missiles, Chung said the food aid issue should be approached from a humanitarian perspective. Chung added that the provision of food is something that's already been decided and that the presidential office is making a range of preparations. As for a potential fourth inter-Korean summit, he said the top office is looking into sending a special envoy to Pyongyang to discuss such efforts. The UN Special Rapporteur on North Korea human rights, Tomas Oleja Quintana, is urging China not to send back 7 North Korean defectors it now has in its custody. In an interview with Voice of America, Quintana said he sent a letter to Beijing a week ago, but has yet to receive a response. He added that he knows how North Korean defectors are treated when they get sent back. They're tortured, and some of them are so desperate not to go back that they try to kill themselves. Quintana emphasized the convention related to the status of refugees, saying that although China regards defectors as illegal migrants, its government should not send them back to the north because they'll be persecuted. An oil tanker from Iran has unloaded cargo at a Chinese port, but with forged documents to make it look like the oil came from Iraq. If this is confirmed, it could further escalate tensions between Washington and Beijing. Cha Sang-mi reports.
Ship tracking data from tracking firm Refinitiv Icon showed a tanker carrying Iranian fuel oil in violation of U.S. sanctions has unloaded the cargo into storage tanks near the Chinese city of Zhoushan. A representative at the oil storage terminal confirmed that the tanker, named Marshall Z, discharged nearly 130,000 tons of Iranian fuel oil and that the trip began 4 months ago. According to Reuters, Iranian fuel oil managed to dodge U.S. sanctions on petroleum exports by using ship-to-ship transfers, including the Marshal Z, and by forging documents that disguised the cargoes as from Iraq. The Marshal Z, according to ship tracking data, arrived at the Jinran terminal on May 8th, and the cargo was not discharged before reaching the terminal about 30 kilometers south of Zhoushan, near Shanghai. The fuel could be stored at Jinran without clearing Chinese customs and officially entering the country, as it offered bonded storage at the terminal. The data showed Marshal Z unloaded the fuel oil on May 12th. This comes less than 2 weeks since the Trump administration stepped up its moves to pressure Iran by ending waivers that granted 8 countries importing limited quantities of Iranian crude oil, including South Korea and China. 차상미, Arirang News.
Former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who heads the new Presidential Committee on Climate and Air Quality, has called for parliamentary support to deal with fine dust pollution. Meeting Friday with Hwang Kyo-an, the chair of the main opposition Liberty Korea Party, Ban said the fine dust issue should not be politicized and that parties should work together to solve it. Ban said his plan is to first devise short-term measures this year after gathering opinions from both experts and the public. Hwang called for more active cooperation with China, which has been pointed to as a key contributor. Ban also sat down for talks with National Assembly Speaker Moon Hee-sang, where he called for parliamentary efforts, whether it be through legislation or budget allocation. He met with the leadership of the ruling and minor opposition parties earlier this month. A used bookstore run by the city of Seoul is holding a special exhibition of magazines from the 1970s through the early 2000s. The store is in the Jamsil area, and it's called Seoul Book Bogo. Some 1,200 magazines are on display, including many first issues collected over the years by used bookstore owners. Through these magazines from the past, visitors can look at pop culture and the way people lived in those times. Many of the magazines on display are for sale, except the ones set aside for conservation. The exhibition runs until May 28th and is open to the public for free. It's felt like summer here this week in Korea. Thing is, it's only mid-May. Earlier this week, a heat wave warning was issued for the southwestern city of Gwangju, where it was over 33 degrees, and here in Seoul, it's been around 30. People are worried that we're in for a hot one this summer. Lee Sung-jae reports.
June is still a couple of weeks away, but already strong sunlight beats down on the streets with heat shimmer rising from the ground. T-shirts, shorts, and sunglasses, along with ice-cold drinks and a handheld fan, have once again become necessities for people in South Korea. With the heat arriving so early, many are concerned about how hot the upcoming summer will be this year.
As soon as I get off the bus, it's very hot. It's impossible to walk around without a fan. Last year was hot, but this time I'm very worried.
While Gwangju already saw its first heat wave warning earlier this week, the entire nation saw temperatures we'd normally expect in July to August. At the peak of the afternoon, road surface temperatures even soared to 50 degrees Celsius in some regions.
I came from Daegu on a school trip, but Seoul is hotter than I expected. I wear cool clothes, but I think it's very hot.
So what's causing this mini heat wave?
The early heat is caused by a combination of strong sunlight, clear skies, and the formation of hot air in China. Westerly winds have brought the heat to South Korea.
While the heat will ease off a touch on Sunday, watchers say higher temperatures are expected in South Korea in June, with this summer potentially set to be one of the hottest in recent memory. Lee Sung-jae, Arirang News.
The Ministry of Economy and Finance has warned of growing downside risks from the slowdown in the global economy and from lower demand for semiconductors. In its monthly Green Book released Friday, the ministry noted that the trade talks between the U.S. and China are a factor behind the volatility in international financial markets, along with the uncertainties over Brexit. Korea's exports fell for a fifth month in a row in April, down 2% on year, mainly due to falling prices of chips and weak demand from China. Exports to China were down for a sixth consecutive month, falling 4.5%. U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to announce his decision on whether to go ahead and impose new tariffs on cars or delay the decision another 6 months. South Korea's trade minister has been in Washington for the past 5 days with hopes of avoiding a negative impact on Korean car makers. Go Dun-hee reports.
South Korea is putting in final efforts to protect local car makers from possible U.S. auto tariffs. Seoul's Trade Minister Yoo Myung-hee has wrapped up her visit to Washington after meeting with U.S. officials to call for an exemption from potential levies. Speaking to reporters on Thursday at Washington Dulles International Airport, Minister Yoo said the Trump administration and members of Congress have positively evaluated the South Korean government's efforts so far, including the revised Seoul-Washington Free Trade Agreement, which came into force this year. During her visit, she met with top officials, including U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, and White House Economic Advisor Larry Kudlow. Regarding Bloomberg's recent report about Washington planning to exempt South Korea from any future tariffs, the trade minister says she won't prejudge before the official announcement. Minister Yoo added that Korean officials did their best until the very end to make sure the so-called Section 232 measures aren't applied to Korean cars. In February, the U.S. Commerce Department submitted a report to the White House on whether imported cars pose a threat to national security by negatively affecting American car makers' ability to invest in future technologies. Although the Trump administration has been reviewing tariffs of up to 25% on imported vehicles, many analysts say the revised Seoul-Washington Free Trade Agreement might have settled the possible trade disputes with South Korea in advance. Bloomberg also reported that President Trump plans to postpone the tariff decision and give the European Union and Japan 180 days to agree to a deal that would limit or restrict auto imports into the U.S. However, speaking to Fox Business on Thursday, U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said President Trump has many options on auto tariffs. 고르니, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics has significantly increased its R&D investment despite a sharp drop in earnings. According to the company's quarterly report released on Friday, its research and development expenditure stood at $4.24 billion for the January to March period. That's slightly lower than the all-time high of $4.47 billion reached in the last quarter of 2018. But it marks the second straight quarter that the firm's R&D spending has surpassed the $4 billion mark. With its plans to invest big in semiconductors as well as 5G, AI, and other future growth engines, Samsung's total R&D spending in 2019 is expected to reach almost $17 billion. The Trump administration has added China's Huawei and 68 of its affiliates in more than two dozen countries to its so-called entity list. That bans Huawei from buying parts and components from American companies without U.S. government approval. Getting approval from the U.S. won't be easy because the government will review applications under a, quote, policy of presumption of denial. President Trump has announced a new immigration policy for the U.S. focused on skills and education rather than family ties. Lee Min-sun reports.
President Trump announced plans for a revised immigration policy on Thursday local time during a speech at the White House's Rose Garden. Trump laid out the new policy, which would give priority to immigrants with higher educational backgrounds, extraordinary talent, professional and specialized vocations, instead of the current family tie-based policy.
Companies are moving offices to other countries because our immigration rules prevent them from retaining highly skilled and even, if I might, totally brilliant people. We discriminate against genius. We discriminate against brilliance. We won't anymore once we get this passed, and we hope to get it passed as soon as possible.
Trump had been arguing that a family-based immigration policy causes chain migration that allows immigrants to invite their relatives to the country, which he claimed undermines jobs for Americans and eventually threatens U.S. national security. The Trump administration plans to reduce family-based immigration and expand merit-based or employment-based immigration for highly skilled workers. However, it seems unclear whether the new policy will be passed as it faces strong opposition from the Democratic Party and also from some Republicans. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
If you're moving around a big city like Seoul, you may have found yourself too close to your destination to take public transport, but too far away to get there on foot. Well, now a number of so-called micromobility platforms are trying to close this gap with things like bike sharing. Our Oh So-young has more.
It's one block too far to walk, but too close to take a taxi or a bus. In recent months, new sharing platforms have been popping up in Korea, creating dockless mobility solutions for commuting and traveling short distances around the city. A bike-sharing service in Seoul offers rental rates of 200 won or less than 20 cents for 10 minutes, compared to the fixed hourly rates charged by existing bike-share platforms.
Our service helps reduce commute time substantially and also makes it more enjoyable. Our users mostly use G-bikes for 15 to 20 minutes at a time, although some use it for much longer.
As the bikes are dockless based on a GPS system, you don't have to look for a designated bike stand when you arrive at your destination. You can simply leave it there for someone else to use. Electric scooter rentals are also offering a more compact and speedier way to get around the city while beating the traffic, and can go up to 25 kilometers per hour.
Scooters have largely been used for leisure, but it's an ideal means of transport in a complex city. It's also eco-friendly. 80% of cars on the road are used by the driver alone. Electric scooters are 100th of their size and also consume 100th the amount of energy, without emitting greenhouse gases. The number of users and the level of usage has grown threefold since March 1st.
As popular and convenient as electric scooters are becoming, there are still some safety issues and regulations that need ironing out.
Electric scooters can't be used on sidewalks or bicycle lanes, as they could pose a danger to pedestrians and cyclists travelling under 25 kilometers per hour. Platform companies have complained this hinders their businesses from growing. Given the surge in demand for micromobility services and promising market prospects, a Transport Ministry official has said some of these restrictions may be eased and some safety standards revised during the latter half of this year. Oh So-young, Arirang News.
South Korea was the first to invent a way to recycle human fat for medicinal or beauty-related purposes. But it's a process that could be used for many more things. Other kinds of medical waste could be used too in the biohealth industry. One of the main things standing in the way, though, is regulation. Our Kim Da-mi has more.
Every year in South Korea, 200 tons of fat left over from operations like liposuction become medical waste. Although it's deemed waste, the fat is actually sought after by cosmetic companies and for medical purposes for active ingredients like collagen and extracellular matrix, which can be used for tissue engineering and regenerative medicine. Recognizing the biohealth industry as the next promising sector of the economy, the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety said on Wednesday that the government will soon lay out a comprehensive plan for innovation focused on R&D and deregulation. Unlike the US, South Korea's current laws mean medical waste, with the exception of placenta, can only be used for research purposes and cannot be commercialized, limiting the advance of this potential sector.
For instance, registering human fat for medicinal purposes could take years, while overseas competitors may develop their own technologies and take over the market.
Recycling and reusing the 200 tons of fat could add $18 billion worth of value in the biohealth market. Another area with a lot of potential value is repurposing old teeth. Those that would have been thrown away, like wisdom teeth, can be used for bone grafts. It's a procedure that was invented 11 years ago in South Korea, but doctors are only allowed to use the teeth of the patients themselves. That goes for dental implants too, which is why so many teeth go to waste and doctors have to find alternatives.
For dental implants, as of 2017, 80% of them are made from cow bones. But if we use human teeth, especially our own or those of others, it'd be much safer and effective because human teeth are made of almost the same stuff as our bones.
Predicted to reach a global market size of up to $10 trillion by 2022, South Korea's biohealth industry can further serve the interests of the country's rapidly aging society, as well as provide opportunities for job creation. 김다미, Arirang News.
It's time now on this Friday for a look at the global markets today and where we stand here at the end of the week. And for that, I'm joined here in the studio by Dr. Kim Se-won, Professor of Economics at Ewha Women's University. Dr. Kim, thanks for coming on today.
Pleasure to be here.
So we had reports coming out this week that the Trump administration was planning to delay a decision on imposing new tariffs on cars. That was a big worry in Korea. But in the end, they also say Korea might be one of the countries that in the end gets an exemption from these tariffs. What was the reason for the delay?
U.S. Trump administration is pretty much focusing on the trade negotiation with China right now. So I think under these circumstances, they want to just focus on the talks with China. That means they don't want to expand their trade battle line with other major trade partners like Mexico, Canada, South Korea, Japan, and Germany. But I believe as soon as U.S. is completed with the talk with China, there is very high possibility that they want to resume the car tariffs issue with other countries.
Once they've got some room to maneuver again.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, and if that did happen, if Korea was ultimately subject to the tariffs, a lot of people are worried about the impact that might have. How badly do you think it would hurt Korean automakers?
If U.S. imposes Korea's car export to U.S., the tariff, I mean, adding the tariffs, that's going to be I think, nightmare to Korean economy. Car export is one of the largest export items to Korean economy. It covers over 10% of total export of the nation. And again, the car export to U.S. covers a third of total car export of the Korea. So under very difficult situation of the memory chip declining is quickly ongoing. If U.S. imposes tariffs on Korea's car export to United States, the combined and negative effect will be huge to Korean economy.
Well, speaking of major effects, we have one that could affect China, and that's with President Trump declaring that products made by Huawei are a national security risk, and that the other way around, that U.S. companies selling their stuff to Huawei is a risk as well. What prompted this, and how severe could the ripple effects be around the world?
Actually, Trump administration is officially saying that the restrictions on Huawei is related to a theft of the technology and the spying issues. But we can interpret their actions in two different ways. The first is they want to use Huawei issues as a leverage in the negotiation with China. And the second is U.S. really want to take the initiative in the 5G technology development. As Mr. Trump said, it is the 5G technology will be the future of the U.S. Technology, because 5G network is highly related to the developments of the fourth industrial revolution, like IoTs and so on.
Right. Yeah, there's a major potential, as everybody knows, so the U.S. trying to get out ahead there. But back here in Korea, from the Finance Ministry, we have the latest Green Book. Again, the concerns are wide-ranging. There's the trade conflict, there's exports down again. What stands out to you in this data?
Well, as you said, the Green Book is Korean government's official assessment of the current situation of Korean economy. So everyone is waiting for the new issues of Green Books, and it has been just released today. And according to the new issues of the May, they are emphasizing downward movements of the Korean economy. Actually, they emphasized that in the last issue, they emphasized that the Korean economy is still maintaining positive momentum of the economy. But in terms of the political perspective, we can see this new issue in different ways, because South Korean government is about to turn in the 6.7 trillion supplementary budget to Congress which should be accepted by Congress. So it is a time for Korean government to empathize the difficult times, which is downward moving Korean economy.
Well, let's stay with that theme here because President Moon just met yesterday with his top officials talking about fiscal efforts, policies from the government to address problems like low growth, unemployment, and so on. In your view, what role do you see for fiscal measures like these?
Actually, there's no question that fiscal measures like spending more money from government is the only way to promoting economy in the short run. But that only works in the short run. In the long run, like over 5 years and 10 years, increasing and improving productivity of the nation and the productivity of the workers and restructuring not competitive industries, the most important issue. So if government continues on spending more money through more taxing and budgets, that will worsens the current status of the balance sheet of the governments, which means more debt of the government. So in the long run, we have to focus more on improving productivity of the workers and reconstructing internationally not competitive industries.
Got it. So in the short term, okay, but not forever.
Exactly.
All right, Dr. Kim, that's where we'll have to leave it today. Thanks for coming into the studio today. We appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thanks for being with us. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.